Right, okay, time I think for an interview with Professor Tim Boatswain. So joining me in the studio is Tim Boatswain, who is the president of the Civic Society in St Albans, and he's here with his monthly update on how we are protecting or not our local environment.
Hello Ian, nice to be with you.
So So Tim, what's happening that you want to tell us about today?
Well, it's a fairly hectic time in the world of planning at the moment because, of course, we've got a new government, and the new government has stated that they want to build 1.5 million new homes during their term of office, which will work out at 370,000 homes a year.
Okay, so that does sound like a lot. I haven't kept track, but I imagine, well, I'm sensing that that's probably a lot more than the previous government was trying to do.
Yes, the previous government said 300,000 and, of course, never reached their target.
Right.
So it's going to be quite a tough call to get to the target, and the implications for St Albans are huge.
Okay, so what, I mean, I guess land being bought up or houses being built in all sorts of places and threat to heritage? What would you say, Tim?
Yes, you may be aware, listeners may be aware, at the moment the local government are putting together what's called the local plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the main part of the local plan is to identify sites where homes can be built.
Mm.
We have the oldest out-of-date plan in the whole country. Our local plan goes back to 1994. We've had 3 attempts to get a new one in, and each one has failed, generally at the inspection point, because they're always examined by external examiner. We're now on our 4th attempt for a local plan, and we're hustling that up, or I should say the council are, to try and get it ready so that it can be inspected in April 2025.
So what's actually in this plan? Does the plan say which areas of the St Albans district are likely to be claimed for housing development, or does it say something? What does it say?
No, that's right, Ian. What happens is there's a call for possible sites.
Okay.
And developers put in their pet sites, and then they are analysed and checked, and then they go into the local plan where housing can be built.
So what qualifies a developer to identify a site? Do they have to own that site, or are they saying that they would buy that site from whoever owns it at the moment and develop on it, or how does that work?
Well, it works both ways. Sometimes the developers will own the site,
right?
But under the English planning law, you can put in a plan for a site that you don't own.
Okay.
And if you get permission for that site, you obviously then have to negotiate with the owner, because possession is 100% of the law. So if you don't own it, you can't develop it.
Right. But presumably, if the developer got the go-ahead to develop on a site that they didn't own for a price that was going to allow them to make an irresistible offer to the current owner of that site, then they could reasonably expect to be able to go ahead on that basis, is what I'm guessing.
This is true. The main restraint for our local plan, in terms of the number of houses we were expected to build under the last government, which was 884 per year.
Per year?
Per year. The main problem for us is that the district is 80% green belt.
Right.
And green belt is, under the NPPF, protected.
What's the NPPF there, Tim?
Right. Bit of technical jargon here, but it is the Bible of planners. It's the National Planning Policy Framework.
Right.
And it has protected the green belt in the past.
Yep.
Now, with the new government, they're loosening the protection, and they're identifying what was perhaps in the past green belt as grey belt.
Right.
Grey belt will be where there's been previous development on the green belt, or there's perhaps an industrial site, maybe a market garden that's no longer operating, and so on. So they will look out for grey belt sites to start with. The problem for St Albans is that the old target, which is in the local plan, has now actually been escalated by the new government by 75%.
Right.
which means over an annual turnaround of over 1,500 houses rather than 884.
Wow. And without naming names, what sort of areas in the St Albans district would now qualify for development where they didn't before?
Well, this is going to be an enormous problem for the local council identifying sites. They'll try, obviously, to do brownfield sites first, which the government are pushing.
Right. What's a brownfield site?
Brownfield sites are usually ex-industrial sites.
Right.
The problem with brownfield is often they are expensive to build on because they may have contamination, if they're industrial, and there are issues with brownfield sites in terms of infrastructure and so on. It is actually easier for a developer to build in the green belt, or what now might be classified as the grey belt, because they can get their infrastructure in much more easily.
Yeah. And just in terms of feasibility now, because that's a huge hike in targets, I think, not just for St Albans but around the country. And I'm just thinking about the struggle that developers have at the moment to get labour and materials and so on to meet their own aspirations, and suddenly they're going to have to potentially nearly double the effort. So where are the resources going to come from, Tim?
This is a very good question, Ian, and I don't have the answer, but you're quite right in terms of availability of materials, in terms of particularly skilled staff to do this is going to be very demanding. And of course this is an aspiration, this target, and they may not be able to achieve it immediately.
No, well, the last government didn't achieve it, so it's quite possible that the new government won't achieve an even higher target, I imagine. And is your sense that therefore this is unlikely really to turn into reality, all of this development, that it'll remain an aspiration and there'll just be a general sense of quiet disappointment in some quarters and relief in others?
Well, realistically, it is going to be, as you suggest, really tricky. What the new government have done, which is slightly different, the standard method, which is an algorithm which creates the targets, the last government withdrew it from being mandatory for political reasons, because the South was really not able to meet it, and there was a lot of MPs, Conservative MPs, who protested.
Of course.
But the new government are going to make the new targets mandatory. So there'll be enormous pressure on local authorities to achieve those targets. And already some will know that the leader of the council here, Paul de Court, who is a Liberal Democrat, has already said without government support, particularly with infrastructure, it will not be possible for this local authority to achieve those targets.
Okay, well, I think, Tim, in that case, what we need is to have another conversation about this in the next month or two to see how the idea has developed. But for now, thanks so much for coming into Mix 92.6 and giving us that update.
You're very welcome.
When your windows need replacing, call the winning team at P&M. Tailor-made